Well, again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. I am Dr. Andrea Bishop, and I direct the Center for Leadership and Development at Harding University. This is our first webinar of fall 2025, and I'm really excited to get started with you today. Our fall webinar series is on the topic of workplace coaching conversations, and the webinars in this series are going to attempt to answer several questions about how coaching might be a useful tool for you and your workplace. So, as many of you know, and as I just mentioned, we use these webinars primarily for our free micro credentials, but we also use these in some of our MAOL Master of Arts in Organizational Leadership classes, specifically in our training and development courses. So, you are getting a little taste of a master's degree by joining us today. One of the primary reasons why I invite guests to join me on these webinars is because, with obviously, they're exceptional leaders or they wouldn't be invited. So that's a given. But the other piece is that they are just really good storytellers. And today, our storyteller is a Harding alum who is just a phenomenal person. I'm so excited I get to share him with you today. Charlie Moore, thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here and be a part of this. And my wife and I love Harding, and so excited to be able to share and learn as well.
Well, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I'll start. I grew up in Newport, Arkansas, so not very far from Searcy. And I went to Harding in '94 to play professional baseball, not to get a degree. And
Right.
I thought until I was about 25 that I was going to play professional baseball and didn't realize I was never good enough. And most people already knew that. But I got my degree in '98 and went to work for a recruiting firm with a guy named Shane Jackson, which many of you may know, and then left there to go work for BNSF Railway and spent 18 years there. And it's interesting because I got my degree in marketing at Harding, and I told one of my professors I never want to be in sales. And the reality is, the majority of my career has been in sales. But I spent 14 of the 18 years of BNSF in the sales organization. About 7 years ago, left BNSF to come to Trinity Rail. Trinity Rail ran their customer service organization, then ran part of sales, and then about a year and a half ago, stepped into the chief commercial officer role there. Trinity Rail, for everybody on the call, Trinity Rail manufactures and leases rail cars. And I know most people, when they see a rail car, they don't understand what's in there. But the reality is, everything you own at some point touched a railroad. So we provide the rail cars to move those commodities on the rails to get from origin to destination and into your home one way or another. So a lot of it's been a learning. It's something I never thought I would do from a career perspective, but definitely been a good journey. I will go backwards because I think this is always important. Family first, and my wife and I got married when we were at Harding when I was 20, and we just celebrated 28 years. We had two daughters. One is 22 in nursing school at Baylor, and the other is 19 elementary education at Baylor. And you'll hear me talk about family throughout today as well.
I love that. Thank you. Well, as you know, our topic today is about the value of making mistakes and how we can coach ourselves and how we can coach our teams to see mistakes as opportunities. So let's get started with an example. Share with us an example of a mistake you've made or witnessed that ended up being a really valuable learning opportunity.
Yeah, I think it's important. I love leading people. I love developing people, but I honestly wasn't always very good at it. And I'm still learning. In my first people leader role, I got promoted from the doer to the leader of that group. And when I hired the girl in to do my job, the reality is I was really good at my job, and that's why I got promoted. But I had that role in that group for a little over a year and a half. And At a year and a half, I got promoted again. And again, this was my first people leader job. So I went to each person on the team and I said, hey, can you give me some feedback and tell me how I did, what I did well, what I could work on? And, I, being the confident, overly arrogant 25-year-old kid that I was, thought I was going to get some great feedback. And the girl that I'd hired to replace me looked me in the eyes and said one sentence, and this was years ago, but I still remember it like it was yesterday. She said, now I will finally get to do my job. And it was a very humbling experience because I thought I was helping her, but I was doing the job for her and never letting her learn through the journey. And so it's been a statement that I keep in front of me to make sure that I'm developing leaders and not showing leaders what to do. And so it was a powerful statement and a very, very humbling statement for me to hear, but it's one that I've carried for over 20 years in my career.
Wow, that's a good one. Goodness.
Not in the moment. So.
No, I bet not in the moment. Yeah. Let me put up the slide really quickly. Audience, as you're going to hear throughout our time together today, mistakes happen, they're inevitable, but how we own them shapes trust, it shapes credibility, it shapes our growth. So, owning the mistake is a big piece of growing from it. And we're going to talk about some key themes today. I think you're going to hear Charlie talk about several of these today, and I just want you to be kind of listening and looking out for them. As he shares stories, be listening for own it, learn from it, and grow from it. And then underneath each of those headings, you can see some coaching questions that could be really useful to get to a place where you are owning it, where you're learning from it, and where you're growing through it. So again, you're going to hear these from Charlie as he speaks. Feel free to use the chat throughout our time together today. Please take a picture of this slide if you would like to. I'll put it back up later too. But we do want your feedback. We want your comments throughout our time together, and we will get to those at the end of the webinar. So, Charlie, here we go. You ready? Why are mistakes so powerful for teaching and learning?
So I'll start with my own story. I carry the weight of the world on my shoulders, and I think every decision that I make throughout my career is a career boost or a career ender. And about 10 years ago, I went through something called Leadership Worth Following. And they do all these tests. They take you through 2 days of battery of exercises. And then the end of day two, they come in and tell you, here's where your strengths are, and this is where your opportunities are. And the feedback to me was, you carry everything like it's the end of the world. And so I have an end of the world notebook sitting beside my desk. And what she told me to do, and this has been powerful for me, what she told me to do is when you feel like something is the end of the world, write it down and date it. And so every opportunity when I have to go back into that book and write something down and date it, I see what else I thought the world was going to end. And it creates this understanding of in the moment, it's painful, but what I learned 6 months later is it's not as big of a deal as I thought it was. And I will tell you, 10 years ago, I filled the notebook up. And so I've been here for 7 years. I've got 2 pages in that whole notebook. So it creates some understanding and some comfort in my own personality of realizing what is into the world and what is a moment in time. But I'll tell you from a learning perspective, if I tell you to do something, and I learned this with my kids who've humbled me greatly, but if I tell them to do something, it's harder because it makes them want to do it more. It's the same thing with my employees. If I tell them go do and I don't give them the why behind it, don't go do, they're going to go try and do it or find a way around it. But if they make a mistake and it's not going to end the world, it creates an opportunity for a conversation and for learning. So my second boss as a people leader called me into his office again. I told you the story about my first time as a people leader. And he said, "Hey, you need to let your people fail." He said, "I know you know what to do, but if it's not going to ruin the company, let your people fail because they will be better positioned to step into your role when you move on." And so it's created an opportunity for me when I sit in and talk to them to ask questions instead of create solutions for them. Now, I may drive them through questions to the place we want to be, but creates an opportunity for learning through that conversation, allowing them to make some little mistakes along the way.
That is really powerful. And it makes me think of something, if you don't mind, I want to share really quickly. Um, so a couple of years ago, when I started being coached, so I was a client, one thing that kept popping up over and over in those sessions was that I was constantly tired, I was constantly burned out, I was constantly frustrated. And when we started digging into the why behind that state, it was clear immediately that I was a rescuer. I was constantly rescuing people and projects, anything within my circle of influence. I was catching things and making sure they didn't fall. And honestly, this is something I still struggle with because I'm a little bit of a control freak. But when I started to recognize the patterns, which I do recognize the patterns now because of coaching, um, I started to see rescuing doesn't help anything or anyone long term. It is a short term, very short term solution that usually has worse effects later on. So the question that my coach asked me, oh my gosh, I hated this
Not
question.
ready for this.
The question that my coach asked me was, well, what if it fails? What if you let that project fail? And I didn't like it at all. In fact, I refused to answer it for several weeks. But the same thing kept happening over and over. And I was working 60-hour weeks. I was exhausted and something had to change.
Yeah.
And so eventually, when he asked, I said, well, I mean, if it fails, then maybe we'll get some help. I mean, maybe we'll get some attention. If we fail, maybe we'll get some more support staff. Maybe we can actually tell someone who will listen, we need more marketing money. We need more funding for this or for that. And being able to verbalize that for myself was important, but it also helped me realize I can't rescue. I mean, I can offer insight and I can ask good questions, like you said, but I've got to stop rescuing because that's actually killing us in our long term plans. So, for those of you who are on the call who might be like me and simply want to do everything in your power to never ever fail, I think you need to ask yourself, and Charlie's probably going to talk about this some more, but what are you missing if you don't allow something to fail? What could you learn if you do allow mistakes to happen and you do allow failure to happen? What harm might be happening to your own health or to your own team because you're constantly rescuing? That was a really tough one for me to learn, Charlie.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
woo, that
I
was a
think it's
that was a
interesting
doozy.
is, and we talk about this in marriage and other things, but how do you set up the proper guardrails so that people hit those guardrails before they go off the edge? And that's more a leadership approach than it is, let me fix it for you.
Mm,
And
mm.
so the mindset of, hey, we're going to run, you're going to run down the path, and this is the lane I need you to stay in, but I'm going to take a step back. And what I've learned with my leaders, because all of my leaders that work for me have been here longer, they know this industry better than I do. They've got great ideas. And so if I go in and just fix, I'm missing out on an opportunity to take a step back and look at the bigger picture.
Yeah, that's really good. So let's think about how do we how do we train a team to reframe mistakes so that we see them as positive? How do we get to that point?
Yeah, it's a couple of things. One, it starts with the vulnerability and the humility of the leader. So as a leader, you've got to be willing to say I was wrong. You've got to be willing to say I'm sorry. You've got to be willing to say I screwed up. And there are times I've overstepped in this company and I've walked in. In fact, I had a guy in here before I got on this call and I said, "Hey, I made a mistake." And he goes, "It doesn't bother me, but I appreciate you saying that." But it's acknowledging that you're important and your ideas are important. And I overstepped and I shouldn't have. And I'm still learning as well. So it creates the opportunity for a greater conversation. Now, I think it's important because, and I know this isn't the question, but some failures are truly failures and they have to be addressed. And so it's figuring out the difference in a failure and a mistake. And a mistake is, what do we learn from this? And one of the things that I do when we lose a deal or we make a mistake internally, I bring the team in and say, "What'd you learn? What do you wish you would have done differently?" But the first thing I do is I check on the person and say,
Hmm.
"How are you?" Because I've got 5 pillars that come up every Monday morning, but for our sales meeting. And the first one is love your people. The other 4 are business related, but the first one is we're dealing with people. And people are so much more than employees. And once they know they are loved and that I'll be vulnerable with them, they're more willing to open up the door to say, "Screwed up. I need some help. Can you process through this with me?"
Yeah. That's really good. When we were preparing for this conversation, which, by the way, audience, I wish that you could prepare for webinar conversations with people like Charlie on a regular basis because it is joyful, and I feel like I always walk away with so much more insight after conversations. But Charlie, especially, is authentic. And as he's talked about, he's very vulnerable. And one of the things that he shared was a personal mistake. And he said he wouldn't mind sharing it with us today. So, Charlie, would you mind telling us about that?
Yeah, and frankly, this is part of our story. And when I say our story, my wife Lana and I, and again, we've been together since I was 18. So we got married when I was 20. So we've grown up together. And 2013, I was running BNSF's crude oil sales team. So it's during the Bakken boom. We took that business from $0 to $1 billion in 1 year. And I went back afterwards, after the rest of the story. I went back and looked, and I was gone at least one night, 43 weeks out of the year. You remove holidays and vacation, I was gone at least one night every week of the year. So, and some of you are old enough to remember this, some of you are not, but there's this wonderful thing called a BlackBerry. And with the BlackBerry, when that red light would go off, it was like a drug. And railroading is 24/7. And so I was on call 24/7, 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. I was on calls. I was dealing with things as this business was growing. My girls were young. And one night we were sitting and playing a game, and the red light went off. Well, I jumped up, I ran over, I messaged and dealt with the issue, came back. My wife is a saint, and she waited till the kids went to bed. And then she looked me in the eyes and said, "I have no idea who you are." And it was one of those moments I was offended because I was doing something noble and taking care of the family and providing for us to have this house and all these things. And so I went back at her with that information, and she said, "I don't want that for me to realize all the noble things in my mind I thought I was doing didn't matter." And it just made me take a step back. And so one of the things that I did as we worked through that, because it was a journey for us to get through that, one of the things that I've done from that point forward is she has full authority to speak into my career. And so she can tell me, "Hey, you are focused fully on your work and you're losing sight of family." And the reality is, work had become priority one, or my God in quotes. and helping reframe and realize that that was not as important is valuable. And so now we'll have the conversation and she'll say, hey, you're not present. And I can either say, I need 3 days. Here's what's going on. Or you're right. I just want to feel important. And my phone makes me feel important.
Mm.
Now, I think it's important that through that conversation, uh, I took some steps back and it has not hurt my career. But I have been platinum or higher with American since my kids were born. I am proud. Somebody asked me what's the proudest thing I have about my career the other day. And I said, the proudest thing for me is I never missed a birthday or a basketball game.
Mm.
And they were shocked by it. And I said, look, I've closed $2 billion deals. I've done all these other things. But the reality is, those things don't matter. And my girls are going to remember those moments for the rest of their lives. And so just making sure, prioritizing, making sure I kept those things, the right things in the right places.
Yeah.
Because somebody said something to me early in my career and it's stuck now is if you get to the top of this place and you lose your family, it's not worth it.
Oh,
And so it's been a powerful reminder and something that I preach. When people meet me, they hear faith, family, and work is somewhere down the line from a priority list. But when those get out of whack, my wife is in place to step in and say, "Hey, you're losing sight of what's important."
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. It was great to get us back on track. Um, this might seem slightly off topic, but one thing that I am always trying to do better is provide actionable feedback. I mean, as leaders, we're often called on to give feedback to the people who work for us, and I don't want it to be empty. So how do you do that in a way that you feel like is powerful and helpful, whether it's for a mistake or not?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, each of my leaders have development plans. So they start the year and they go through them with me. What do they want to accomplish? Try to limit it to three things because once you stretch out beyond three things, you're not going to get it done. It just spreads you too thin. But once I know what's important to them, we have weekly one-on-ones, but also feedback in the moment is powerful. So when we walk out of a meeting and they've done something that highlights some of their development plan, I have notes by my desk and I write handwritten notes and take them to people just to say, hey, I see you.
Yeah.
And it's just a powerful reminder of, I know what you're working on and I see you doing those things well to try to continue to repeat those behaviors. In those moments where they've done something that goes against what they're wanting to be and who they're wanting to be as a leader, when we walk out of that meeting, I call them in and say, how do you think that went? And
Yeah.
I have a moment there where I know if they're connecting the dots or not, because sometimes they'll say, it was great. We got everything we wanted. And then other times they'll say, I know I was a little too pushy on this and I could have taken this way to bring them into the conversation. But having that basis of what's important, what I want them to accomplish and they want
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
accomplish
Yeah.
creates a base load to go back and say, hey, this is what we talked about. This is what you want to be.
Yeah. How do you do that when you've got so many people who report to you? Or how many people report to you?
So I have my organization is over 60, but my team is 5.
Okay.
So they have people under them. So my expectations for them is what they're doing. They're driving down into the organization. So it's a little easier for me than it is for their teams, but I do skip levels and I walk the floors and talk to their people and I can watch them and see, are they living out the values that we continue to say are important?
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the value of a skip level before we move on.
One, I think it's important from a leadership perspective for my people to know this is not a gotcha game. This is a getting better understanding what's going on deeper in the organization. When I was at BNSF, I used to say when you get to a VP level, you forget what it was like to be at that lower level. And
Yeah.
so having that skip level gives me the opportunity to understand what is bothering you, what's causing you challenges to do your job. Because once it gets up to me, it's gone through multiple layers, and I need to hear on a consistent basis. So I actually do a quarterly lunch with our youngest salespeople, and I just bring them in and say, "What's going on?" And it's funny how they've gotten more comfortable over the course of the last year and a half to be willing to say, "This stinks, and I'm tired of doing this." And because at first they were pretty guarded, and now they're pretty open books. And again, they know I'm not going to use it against anybody, but I'm trying to make the company better.
Yeah, that's impressive, honestly. For people who are at that lowest level to feel trust in the top guy, like that speaks very highly of you because that doesn't happen very often at all.
It's one of those that I've got written on my board a number of things, but one of those is be confident that you belong in the chair, be humble enough to know somebody else can do it. And so it's
Mm,
that reminder of getting into the organization to make sure, because I've been there and I know
yeah.
what it's like. And those people are going to be the next people in my chair.
Yes. It's great. Do you ask any questions in those skip meetings, like any targeted sort of coaching questions?
It's, I definitely always ask them career aspirations. What do they want to accomplish? And then where do they think they are? It just helps me get a sense of what are they trying to do? And are they on that path? And it creates an opportunity for me and their leader to figure
Mm,
out, are they way off in their expectations? And if they are, how do you get them back on path? Or, okay, this is the guy I'm seeing or the girl, and I'm seeing the things you're seeing. How do we continue to press forward?
yeah,
But a lot of career, but again, I said this earlier. I tell people faith and family are critical for me. So family is a conversation I have because I believe this wholeheartedly. When you're good at home, you're great at work. When you're not good at home, you are not good at work. And I've
mm,
sent an employee home for 2 weeks to go fix his marriage. And I told him I don't want to hear from him because that's part of the journey for us is making sure, again, we love our people.
that's really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Is there another example of either a mistake or a failure that you can share with us and how you coached the team through it?
Um, you know, uh, there are things that happen on a consistent basis. I mean, we're clearly not perfect at this company, but I've got a young sales leader that I promise you will have my chair at some point. But I have been his direct boss or indirect boss since he's been at this company. And he's made a few mistakes on his sales opportunities, how much information he's giving to a customer because he's trying to win a deal. And so he and I have a very good relationship. He actually asked if he could sit right outside of my office. So I see him every day. But he's made a couple of mistakes on a couple of deals because he's just trying to win. And again, so what we do in those conversations is I bring him in and say, why did you do what you did? To understand what was driving the decision behind it. And then how would you do it differently next time?
Mm,
And so I look at him over the last 5 years, he has become one of our top salespeople, and he will win we have a Diamond T award for the best salesperson in the company because of the numbers they put up. And he will
mm,
win that this year. He doesn't know it yet, but he will win that this year. And watching him progress from an immature 25-year-old kid that thought he knew everything to where he is now has
mm.
been fun to watch. But being a part of that journey and not destroying the passion, but helping him with the guardrails to use that passion in the right way.
Yes. Thank you for that. Audience, for those of you who have come back, first of all, thank you. I think we had about 35 when everything went crazy, and we're back to about 22 in the call. Thank you for coming back and for trusting us. If you missed my explanation, we had someone break in and share something obviously inappropriate, and I am sorry for that. Hopefully, we've got that locked down now. And what we're trying to do is sort of pivot from that and get back on track. If you have a question for Charlie or a comment for Charlie, please put that in the chat. We're going to get to those in just a few more minutes. Charlie, while they're doing that, what do you want our people to walk away from this webinar with today?
I did write these down because I think it's um, just the things that I'm passionate about. And one is never lose sight of what's important to you. And so I talked to North Texas recently and talked about what I wish I knew when I was 22. And one of those things was you'll change, you'll mature, you'll do things differently over the course of your career, but never lose sight of who you are at the core and never change that for anybody. So I think that's important. As a leader, vulnerability and humility. Not everybody's going to appreciate humility. I've got a book right here called The Power of a Humble Life, and it's one of the best books I've ever read and talks about blessed are the meek. And that whole concept in meek in Greek actually means restraint.
Mm.
And I didn't understand that, but you have power, but how do you use it in the appropriate ways and the appropriate times? Again, not everybody's going to love humility, but humility is required to be successful as a leader. And then for me, the last thing, and this has always been one I've tried to remember, and you've probably seen this post on LinkedIn and other places, but be the leader you needed when you were younger. And I
Mm.
love that whole concept of everybody you talk to has fears, they have concerns. Um, be that safe space, be that open dialogue to share some of your own failures and your own journeys, because with that, you become a place that those people can grow and become better employees and better people, frankly. So,
Yeah.
and then I think the last thing as a leader is just be willing to say, I don't know. And that is not a concept I learned early, but sitting in this chair now, it is a concept that I'm more than comfortable saying, I don't know. What do you think?
Mm. Yes. I think that kind of brings us back to maybe where we started, and it's this idea that maybe the younger that we are, the less experienced that we are, the more resistant we are to admitting to failure, want like being willing to admit to failure. So let's think about like the trajectory of a career and the differences between someone who might be a new hire in who has just made a mistake and someone who's a little more seasoned and who just made a mistake. What can you share with us about those two ends of the spectrum?
Yeah, I think the gravity of mistakes that I make now are substantially financially have a greater impact. And I carry that burden just because that's my personality. But, it's funny. I go back and I look at when I was younger in my career, and I talked about the End of the World Notebook and how I filled it up all the time because I thought those decisions that I was making were world ending when I worked for a $25 billion company and it was a $500,000 decision. The math doesn't work. But the concept of carrying that burden alone is, as a leader, that's something you've got to get people to be able to open up about, because the reality now, sitting in this chair, the things that I was carrying on my shoulders were not even big deals. They were
Yeah.
just opportunities to fail fast and learn from your mistakes. And I'm better now sitting in this chair because I had those moments. And so, again, I think creating that opportunity for conversation and vulnerability helps tremendously in helping younger people understand how to share and then how to learn from those mistakes.
Mm, yes, that's really good. It looks like we might have something in the chat. Can you see that, Charlie?
Uh,
We have someone from Frank has said, thanks for sharing such nuggets, Charlie. When have you had to fire people and how have you handled that?
that is, I will tell you, the worst thing career wise I've ever done. And I've done it a number of times and it's painful. Uh, I don't sleep for about 3 days before I do it because even if it's justified, I remember that person is a person,
Mm.
they're a spouse, they bring in money for their family, they're maybe a parent. And so I try to never lose sight of the fact that I'm sitting across from somebody that is a person, and this is going to hurt.
Mm.
And so just being I can only say so much when I'm sitting in that room, and that's why HR is sitting in that room. But I try to, from a nonverbal perspective, just show I care and try to live out that moment. And I've had a couple of people follow up after I've done it and ask me if I would help them if they got into a spot to find a job. And depending on the person, the answer is yes. But
Yeah.
it's uh, I tell people the first time I ever fired somebody, the HR person walked in the room and said she brought Kleenex and she goes, "This isn't for them, this is for you." So that tells you she knows my heart and knew that I would cry afterwards just because, again, it's a person. So,
Yeah. Yeah. That's really powerful. And also just another example of why you're the perfect leader to have on this webinar with us. Thank you for sharing that vulnerability. And thank you for the great question, Frank. Kathy Dillon has asked, or it's really more of a comment. I love the idea of being the leader we may have needed when we were younger. This is similar to becoming the parent you need for your own inner child self, and it really resonates.
yeah,
Um, it
I'll tell you,
does resonate.
yeah, I'll tell you a quick story. Uh, I tell people everybody has that inner voice. And mine tells me I'm not good enough. Mine tells me I'm a fraud, and they're going to figure out at some point I have no idea what I'm doing. Uh, my daughter, my oldest daughter, was a good high school basketball player. She started her junior and senior year, and she was having trouble early in the season hitting 3-pointers, and that was her specialty. And we went to the gym one night, and I said, basketball is mental and physical. Your physical is fine.
Yeah.
Mentally, you're destroying yourself. I
Yeah.
said, close your eyes and shoot the three. And
Oh,
she shot it and she swished it. And the first thing I said was, thank you, God. And then the second thing I said, hey, this is what you need to understand.
yes.
Whisper that tells you when you miss the first shot that you're screwing up the team and everybody's
Oh,
with you is your own whisper. And it either drives you or it destroys you, but you get to
oh,
choose. And so
yes.
teaching her that, I was teaching myself the same thing in my own career. So that inner
Yes.
parent, inner child thing, I'm still journeying on that as well.
Oh man, that's a good one. I like that. I'm going to go back. We're starting to run short on time, so I'm going to go back and share a slide from earlier. We sort of started with this slide, and now that we've got some more specifics that we can attach to it, I wanted to walk through a few of these. For those of you who are maybe new to the idea of coaching, the best suggestion that I can give you is to self-coach with good coaching questions for a while. So if you've recently made a mistake or you make a mistake anytime in the near future, these coaching questions are a great way to start processing where you are and how to move past the mistake itself into a space where you can learn from it and grow from it. So, as we noted earlier, we're going to own it, we're going to learn from it, we're going to grow through it. One of the best coaching questions that I've been asked as a client was when you communicate ownership, what are you going to say? And then to actually rehearse what I'm going to say. I am not one of those people who is really confident about speaking without thinking first. So for me to think through and really rehearse, okay, I'm taking ownership of this mistake and I'm going to tell people that I'm taking ownership of it. What am I going to say? That's a really good exercise for me. Um, Under learn from it, the one that has been most powerful for me is here in the middle. How does this connect to patterns you've noticed in your work or life? As I mentioned earlier, I told a story earlier for Charlie. Um, Learning that I was a rescuer was something that I also connected to other places and spaces in my life. And I don't know that I ever would have come to that realization without this particular coaching question of what are the patterns? Why is this happening in other areas of your life? And then the grow through it column, what are you going to do to repair? Like, yeah, you've admitted to it, you're learning from it, but you're not going to move past it until you rebuild or repair or realign after the mistake happens. And then that question at the bottom is good in any circumstance. What's one small step today that you can take that is going to put you on the right path? And that's for mistakes, but it's also for just goal setting. At the bottom of the screen, I've added some questions specifically about failure or making mistakes. But what happens if we never make a mistake? If we never make a mistake, we're never learning from it. If we never fail, we're never learning from it. And there are best and worst case scenarios for both sides of that. The thing that I noticed or that I learned, a very important lesson, was that who's going to notice if I never fail? And the answer is no one is going to notice. If things keep going as status quo is what it is. And that means no one's really noticing it. So if I continue to rescue, if I continue to pick up the slack, no one's ever going to notice that. It's just what becomes the expectation. But who's going to notice if I do fail? People will notice, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. We need people to notice if we're struggling with things. And so we have to kind of give ourselves permission to do that. Charlie, would you add anything to any of that?
Uh, yeah, I mean, I like some of these. When you communicate ownership, what will you say? I speak to the book Good to Great, that every failure, when I speak to the leadership team, every failure that comes out of my organization, I look in the mirror.
Mm.
Every success that comes out of my organization, I look out the window. So I look at my people and I praise them. But if it's a failure that comes out, I own it and then I praise in public and I challenge in private. And that's how I live.
Mm.
So
I love that. Thank you. We do have one more question. I'm going to leave the slide up for anyone who wants to take a photo of it. But Jeremy has asked, which is easier, giving yourself permission to fail or giving an employee permission to fail? So we'll start there.
yeah, that one's easy. It's a whole lot easier for me to let my employees fail. Again, I told you about the end of the world notebook. I still carry that mentality of I have a perfection complex, and so I struggle with that because I want to be perfect, and I know I'm not perfect. So
Yep.
I'm still journeying through some of that. And then the second part of the question, uh, time has been the best teacher for me. When you say, what process do you go through to make sure the failure doesn't anchor you back to that point in time? Time has been a good teacher to remind me that those things don't define me.
Mm.
They are a part of developing me. And so I think if, as long as you can take that, and this is a great question, it's a hard to process, but as long as you can take that moment in time and say, what did I learn from it? And how do I become a better person? Or with your people the same way. I think it helps you not let that become I suck because, and sorry, maybe I shouldn't say suck on Harding's website.
I think we've gone way past that today. I think you're fine. Oh, that's good. Okay, so as we start to wrap up, I do want to take the opportunity to share that our September webinar is going to be on how coaching helps with work-life balance and productivity. And really, Charlie has given us a great springboard into that conversation with a couple of the stories that he shared. Our speakers in September are going to be Kevin Kale and Travis Stewart. They are both coaches who coach very different types of clients. Kevin works primarily with people in higher education. Travis works primarily with people in ministry, nonprofits. So I think that the depth of what they'll be able to share is going to be really rich for all of us. And I'm honestly just really excited to get into that conversation. I think we all deal with work-life balance issues, and having some good coaching questions in our pockets can help with that. If you want to sign up for it, it's free. Just use that QR code there on the screen. I'll leave that up for just a second. Charlie, do you have any parting thoughts for us?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, if I would hope you take away from this for me, is um, people are people are dealing with different things, and so um, and I'm not saying this because this is a Harding thing. I'm saying this because this is who I am. But be Jesus to somebody. And no matter who you're dealing with, they've got something going on. And
Mm.
so there's such an opportunity to speak love into somebody's life and to have an impact on them wherever they are. And I think that's what we're called to do at this while we're on this earth. And so, again, I've done it and I failed at it. But so I'll bring it back to the failure conversation. But to me, if nothing else, that's what I want people to take away is um, be Jesus to somebody.
Mm, that's so good. Yes. And Russ has a good parting question for us to close on today. What change would you make if you weren't afraid of being judged for it?
That's
That's
a
a tough
great
one.
question. Yeah. I don't know. Um, you know, I am, Andrea and I were talking about this, and so this will be my answer, but I'm a pretty reserved person. I'm pretty quiet and pretty laid back. I think I process before I speak, and if I wasn't judged for it, I would be more vocal at times, and I think that's an opportunity. It's on my development plan. So
That's a really good one. That's really good. Well, Russ, I'll try to answer and then we'll close out. I have a very strong aversion to looking like I don't know what I'm talking about. So I think that um, if I was not afraid of being judged for it, that I would probably ask more questions that might show that I don't know what I'm talking about. Sometimes I'm not great at asking questions in the moment because I think the questions project a lack of knowledge, which they do, and I don't want to project a lack of knowledge. So I guess that would be my answer. I want to thank every one of you for coming back to close out with us. Thank you for these kind comments. We appreciate it. We love the questions. And I hope you'll join us again in September for our next webinar. Charlie, thank you so much. You
thank
have
you.
been an absolute joy. And I am just so grateful we've had the last month or so to talk
Yeah.
and prepare for this together.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for asking.
Yes. Everybody have a great day and we'll see you next month. Bye.